In the end, most governments are run by a small group of people for their own benefit without reference to what the majority wants. And I hate to believe that that's true in this country, but all the evidence suggests that it is. In fact, it's provable. You know how you prove it? Public opinion polling. Take a look at the latest Gallup poll. Pick a poll. What are the top 10 issues for people in the United States? And then compare those to the priorities of your leaders. So people are leaving Michigan because it's very hard to make a living here, and you're constantly hassled by a government that never stops growing and that is leeching off an economy that hasn't grown in decades, okay? That's the truth. Take a look at the priorities of the low IQ lunatic who's running your state, Gretchen Whitmer, who deserves zero respect, no respect. Her priorities are what? Putting you in jail if you, quote, misgender somebody? What percentage of the population of the state of Michigan, even southeastern Michigan, is on board with that as a top concern? It's like roughly around 0.1%, okay, in that range. The things that people care about, Gretchen Whitmer couldn't care less about. Because democracy isn't functioning. If democracy was functioning in America, in Michigan, in California, the District of Columbia where I live, the state of Maine, the state of Texas, how many Texans do you think are all on board with letting 7 million people cross into their state illegally? What percentage? Zero. I don't care what your race or national origin, nobody is for that. That's insane. Has the governor of Texas done anything meaningful to stop that? No. The Republican governor? He's got a National Guard. He's the commander-in-chief of the National Guard, and it's Texas, so they're all large. And they have double-stack magazines in their sidearms. You think they couldn't stop that in a week if they, of course. Just assemble along the border. We're not doing this. No, he refuses to do that. He won't do it. And it's not like no one suggested. I've suggested to him 3 times, including in private at a cocktail party in Dallas last year. What are you doing, man? Don't you have a National Guard? Why don't you seal the border? Oh, it's very complicated. No, it's not. No, it's not. If someone's trying to break into my house, it's not complicated to repel the person. Do you have a firearm or don't you? Are you willing to defend your house and your children, or aren't you? Well, it's more complicated. Really, tell me how. Speak slowly so I can understand. It's not more complicated than that. It's more dishonest than that. You're lying to me. You don't want to do it because your donors don't want you to do it. It's that simple. Greg Abbott. Liar. And worse than liar, betrayer of your own people. That's what that is. I was polite at the cocktail party, so I didn't say any of that, but I fumed internally like an Episcopalian. I thought those things. But the point is, if you assume that just because everybody wants something, you're gonna get it, think again, pal. It's very likely that, in fact, you won't get anything that you want. You will just pay for what a small group of other people want. That's the way it works. Boo! Boo is right. Boo is right. It's not just frustrating, it's a betrayal of the core promise of the country, which is the people rule. That's a criminal act. That is a criminal act. Let's just put this in context. It's not just like you have boutique, weird right-wing views and that's how they want you to feel. Like, oh, you're an extremist. Really? I'm an extremist? I'm the one who let 7 million people into our country illegally, whose names we don't know? In the middle of a drug war? Yeah. I'm the one who's ignored over 100,000 fentanyl deaths every year for the past 5 years. I hate the show of hands thing, but ask yourself, do you know somebody who's died of an opioid OD in the last 5 years? And everybody in this stadium does. And yet, if you watch the news or listen to the repulsive imposters who run our country, it's never mentioned. Really. Over 100,000 American-born young people dead every year, and some of them are not drug addicts. It's not just like you remember as a kid, there's some junkie found in an alley with a hypodermic needle in the crook of his arm. And you're like, well, that's sad, but also, you're a junkie. No, these are 15-year-olds who buy a Percocet on Instagram and are poisoned because China is exporting the precursor chemicals for fentanyl into Mexico, where it was shipped here directly by the drug cartels and put into pills that are not advertised as fentanyl. It's called poisoning. Poisoning the US population and not of the elderly, This is not COVID. These are the people who will continue our civilization. This is our future. These are young people. I mean, I know them, and I live in a pretty weird world. I mean, I've lived in rich person world I don't anymore, but I did. And there are people in my neighborhood whose kids died that way, who were poisoned to death, and nobody said anything about it. Multiply that times over 100,000 every year. Think that's a core concern? You think? If 100,000 people were dying on playground equipment every year, we'd have no more playgrounds. I don't even get into the COVID thing. I know many people died of COVID. I never met one. I know a lot of people who got sick from the vaccine, but whatever. That's not allowed. Shut up. Okay. But the point is, huge things can happen. Huge things can happen right in front of you, right out in the open. It's not some like crazy conspiracy that you have to get onto the dark web to learn more about it. It's your neighbor's boy just died. He's in 9th grade. He bought a Percocet and they found him dead when they woke him up for school. And nobody cares. And we know how it's happening. We're not guessing. And nobody cares. Oh, it's more complicated than that. No, it's not complicated. And what's not complicated is they are destroying the country, whether it's on purpose or not, is immaterial. It does not matter. They are doing it. And everyone passively sits back as if it's not happening. And if you continue to passively sit back as if it's not happening, what's going to happen? Will it decelerate or accelerate? Yeah, those of you who have served in prison know. First they cut in front of you in line, okay? It doesn't get better from there. Then they sell you for a pack of cigarettes. You gotta say, stop. You cannot treat me this way. This is not your country, it's mine. Period. So the two ways you do this are by organizing and speaking. And on the question of organizing is difficult. Some people have a brain for it, others don't. But the principle is not complex. You are stronger in a group. And this is exactly why the Biden administration has handed out 20 and 25-year prison sentences to people who didn't actually do anything in the last week on January 6th. Why? Because they were in some group that was probably at least half federal agents, but whatever. The idea of people being organized, of coming together with a common purpose is terrifying. The left, I will say to their great credit, are masters of organizing. They are dutiful, they show up, they are disciplined, and they are willing to put aside their differences for the sake of achieving a common goal. They don't argue with each other in public, they just all say the same thing, they all vote for the same person, because they know their strength in numbers. Conservatives, on the other hand, are very focused on their family, their faith, their jobs. Politics comes at least fourth in their hierarchy of concerns. And they also have integrity and self-respect. So it's very hard to get a conservative person to repeat some talking point he doesn't actually believe at all. They won't just sit around and wait for whatever the new lie of the day is and then just repeat it with dead eyes on television. Liberals have no problem doing that because they know that's the path to power. But they're right, it is the path to power. Organizing is the path to power. So if I were trying to figure out what to do in Michigan, I'd go right to the problem, which is your teachers union. It's really simple. And it's hard for conservatives to do that because they're very easily intimidated by moral aggression. You see this in the gun debate time after time. So if someone comes to you and says, we're gonna hike up the crime rate to a point where you have a non-zero chance of getting murdered, but we're gonna take away means of defending yourself, you'd be like, no, I don't think so. But that's not what they do. They say, guns are bad, guns kill people, it's gun violence. Yeah, gun violence, okay. I live in a town with 100% gun ownership, and there's no violence. There's also 100% chainsaw ownership. And there are very few chainsaw-related crimes in my county. No, the object isn't committing the crime, a person is. But they'll get right in your face and say guns are the problem, and if you care about children, people who have no children will lecture you, who have many children, about the children. And rather than saying, I'm sorry, how many kids do you have, you barren freak? Get out of my face. No. Oh, the children, well, I love children, I've got 4 of them. I want to help the children. It's like, you are speaking in bad faith, you want to control me. Leave. Don't be intimidated. And so on the question of organizing, if people who are against whether, and I don't even know what conservative means anymore, but if you're against what we're doing now, a system that does not serve people, that only hurts them, that makes them weaker, unhealthier, less reasonable, more dependent on the people in charge, that's the program. If you're against that, you need to organize.
Younger people say the news is full of lies.
In Kennedy's motorcade.
239 people. The death of Jeffrey Epstein.